Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Bienvenue à cette réunion.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of council. It's this bi-weekly meeting, a meeting during which we listen to you. There are several items before us, but it's not a decision-making session. We don't make decisions on any of these issues. The files are then transferred to staff as needed. So without any further ado, we're starting off with a presentation from Mr. Truchon. No, before Mr. Truchon, we have Mr. Lalonde. No, first of all, with Mr. Jason Frenet. Mr. Jason Frenet, yes, indeed. I apologize. Good evening and welcome. And thank you for sending us your concerns, and I'm eager to hear you speak to them. Just a second, I will turn your mic on.
Merci beaucoup. Merci de
Thank you.
m'avoir appris.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to talk to you about our concerns about safety in the municipality and certain incidents that have occurred. So I think you received a copy of my concerns. So as a resident, and as a business owner, I'd like to formally express my growing concern about the increase in crime in our community and the rising sense of insecurity among citizens, businesses, and investors. In recent years, our municipality has experienced a notable rise in break-and-enters, property thefts, and vehicle thefts. I have personally been the victim of a burglary, a property theft, and the theft of a truck. These events, unfortunately far from isolated, have created a climate of vulnerability and concern for many members of our community. When public safety deteriorates, the impacts extend far and beyond the direct victims. Businesses suffer the consequences, employees feel less safe, customers avoid certain areas, and investors hesitate to commit to zones perceived as high risk. This situation directly affects property values, local employment, and economic growth. Public safety is therefore both a fundamental social issue and an essential pillar of economic development. I firmly believe that immediate action is necessary. Our municipality must adopt a clear, structured, and measurable public safety action plan aimed at strengthening law enforcement, improving prevention, and increasing accountability. To that end, I'd like to bring to your attention a public safety proposal that I submitted to the Honorable Robert Gauvin, Minister of Public Safety, as well as the Honorable Robert McKee, Minister of Justice. I'm convinced that this proposal can help make a concrete contribution to addressing current challenges at the municipal, provincial, and federal levels. This proposal is based on a balance between firm consequences for serious and violent offenders and stricter accountability measures for nonviolent offenders who do not pose an immediate threat. It includes, in particular, longer and more restrictive probation periods, mandatory electronic monitoring bracelets for repeat offenders, mandatory participation in rehabilitation programs tailored to the nature of the offense, increased supervision, potentially long-term, under strict judicial control, partial financial responsibility for rehabilitation and supervision costs by the offender. I understand that some of these measures fall under provincial and federal jurisdiction. However, the role of the municipality remains essential. I respectfully request the municipality's support and leadership so that it may exert constructive pressure on the provincial and federal governments, notably through the adoption of municipal resolutions and official measures aimed at implementing electronic monitoring bracelets for repeat offenders of minor repetitive crimes. At the municipal level, I will also recommend that police services be equipped with additional tools and technology in police vehicles to improve neighborhood monitoring, both day and night. This could include mobile surveillance capabilities, access to real-time data, and tools for analyzing crime trends. I also encourage the strengthening of a proactive policing approach, including identifying more vulnerable residential and commercial properties, identifying types of vehicles frequently targeted, proactively educating residents and business owners on risk reduction strategies, increased surveillance of high-risk locations and sectors, and a more visible police presence in vulnerable areas. I also respectfully submit the proposal to create a municipal support, safety, and recovery program for victims of property crimes intended for residents and businesses affected by break-in enters, thefts, or repeated crimes. Being the victim of a property crime is not only a material loss, but a profound blow to one's sense of safety. Many victims experience anxiety, fear, lasting trauma, and a loss of confidence in their own home, in their business, and their neighborhood. Such a municipal program could include a post-incident security assessment carried out quickly by a municipal police officer, increased temporary police supervision, including targeted patrols during high-risk periods, assignment of a liaison officer serving as a point of contact for victims, personalized crime prevention training, coordination with municipal services to address environmental issues such as lighting, visibility, layout, and so on, rapid referrals to mental health and victim support resources. This combined approach, law enforcement, prevention, accountability, rehabilitation, and victim support, would help reduce re-victimization, ease pressure on police and correctional services, decrease social and economic costs, and strengthen citizens' trust in public institutions. These so-called minor crimes are not minor in their consequences. They lead to police overload, increased insurance costs, significant financial losses, real psychological distress, and an erosion of collective security. Living in this community is both a privilege and a responsibility. Law-abiding citizens, entrepreneurs, and investors should never feel abandoned or exposed due to a lack of action. I am writing not only on my own behalf, but also on behalf of many people who feel concerned, unheard, and increasingly vulnerable. I respectfully ask you to treat this situation with the urgency it requires and to move forward with a clear, applicable, and measurable public safety action plan. I would be pleased to discuss these proposals further or to contribute constructively to any initiative aimed at improving the safety of our community. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you. I'm sorry to hear what happened to you. That I am happy that you had the courage to come talk to us about what happened, especially given the fact that all members of council are here this evening and the representatives of the RCMP are here as well. That I can see that they were taking notes, copious notes. Yes, I've already met with Paul Godet and Marc Godet as well. They were very helpful, so I appreciate it. Even Paul told me he came to the house and we talked and I was able to make a proposal, and he was a victim himself, I believe. So I think that the municipality is growing, and I think that the municipality is at a point now where, and I'm not criticizing the RCMP. We have a great service, great system, but I tried to get help in Rishabukdu, and it took 3.5 hours. But here they're much quicker. But we do need a municipal police force, and somebody already asked me about I'm not asking to remove any services from the RCMP. I'm just asking that if we can get the information from the RCMP given to the municipality and be able to find out who the criminals are in our community and to keep a closer eye on them. And when something happens, and I know things are always going to happen, but things like this will happen, but nobody knew that we were going to be victims, and we get no help. We get no help from the system. So there's no plan for this municipality for Dieppe to become that could become an example for other municipalities. I've already asked Robert what they do elsewhere in other municipalities, and there's nothing anywhere else either. Yes, that is a very big problem elsewhere as well. And quite often we'll think, oh, it'll never happen to me. It'll never happen in my house. Well, yeah, even when you see it, when you become a victim of that, you start to see things differently. And so the municipality is growing, and I looked at the budget, the money that's spent in the municipality, and I'm not here to criticize anybody, but nothing was given. Well, yeah, there were $500,000 more, but it's but it's not by the price of the US RCMP has just gone up. It's not adding services by the RCMP, and I know they have to serve Moncton and Riverview as well, but so I want to keep this simple, but I'm looking at the possibility of having some municipal officers, bylaw officers, for example, who could go around when a crime is committed, that you could call somebody directly, that somebody who would support you directly. And support is so important. We don't know what to do when something happens. We don't know who to call. Well, yes, it's very upsetting, of course, when that happens, but thank you. We have a good relationship with the RCMP, and that is growing. They've increased their staff numbers as well for the region overall. I used to say, I always said that we're lucky here in Dieppe because a lot of members of the RCMP live here in Dieppe. So when when it's time to go for lunch or go home for supper, they don't go to the restaurant. They come home. They come to their home. They come to here in Dieppe. So, and it's not. And I'm not trying to defend them. They're they're old enough to defend themselves. But this is a problem everywhere. And what can we do? Well, where we are at currently, right now, of course, your complaint will be looked at by council, but not by council, sorry, by staff, and along with the RCMP. Well, you know, Ben talked to me earlier, and because my proposal here that I'm trying to set forward with the federal and provincial government is the monitoring bracelets that they have to wear, because when this incident occurred, I was frustrated towards the RCMP, and and I'm not saying why didn't they take prints in my house? I mean, it's or the garage. They were just saying, well, we'll just investigate, and and then we'll look at this, we'll investigate, and it won't stay in the system. So there was one in the system, one person in the system. There are 68 violations against him of theft, and I'm not exactly sure, but I know that there were a lot of violations to that person's name, and it's just I just want to make sure that we have a system that keeps an eye out and on these offenders. And for me, the RCMP, I mean, I prefer they focus on the bigger crimes, but that we have a municipal system. And I'm not asking them to have firearms either. It's just to somebody that we could notify when something happens, when there's a crime, somebody that could keep an eye out. I mean, there are different seasons. And when I talked to Robert about it, he said, well, it's the holidays. That's when the crime rate goes up. And okay, so what did you do about it? Well, I'm not here to to come back to the incident. It took place. It's over, but it's the future of my children. It's the future of your children, and it's really important. When I moved here 25 years ago, it wasn't like this, and I understand the population wasn't the same either, but the numbers weren't the same. But I think that by becoming more aware of it, by taking action, by advertising, like I talked to Paul about it, and Mr. Melanson, during the holiday period, you know, I mean, on the Facebook page, just to let people know. Looks at crime rate goes up during the holidays because people aren't home as much. So it just, and that's how it happened. That's how it happened at our house. We weren't home, and the, and it was like, welcome, come on in. So just to let people know, educate people, and and have officers come by. I understand. I mean, you know, the criminals. I mean, if they see if a police car come by, well, they're gonna hide. But um, it's just support for me was the biggest thing. I can't say I don't know his name, but he was sat on council in the past. He was a victim of a break and enter as well, and he called me to tell me, and he said during the holidays, he said, I'm so looking forward to the end of the holidays because his child was traumatized, and there's nobody you can call. Everybody's off during the holidays, so there are services, and I don't want to overload the government either, but there are support services, but there are some services free that are offered free of charge in these kind of cases. And when there is a crime committed, the municipal officer could come to the house right away to tell you, and would have the time to give you education and to talk about resources. And the 2 and 3 days after the incident, I couldn't even think. First of all, when I called the police, I called 911, and they told me, well, it's a crime that was committed in the past. It's not an active case. So you have to call your local police. And I'm like, what? And then they hung up, and I told my wife, well, what's the phone number of the police? I have no idea. And I talked to Melanson about that, and perhaps your website should say it, or perhaps, send text messages, send them to everybody, to send everybody to tell everybody what the police number is. Tell your kids what is the number of the local police, because 911 will not take the call. They're going to hang up on you. If it's a crime that is not in progress, if it's a crime that was committed in the past, it's not in progress. And so that's nothing. So I didn't know who to call. I had to Google police in Dieppe. It's just a question of education. I'm not criticizing the RCMP or 911. It's a great service, but it's just I didn't know. It never happened to me before, so I just didn't know. Well, I know one thing for sure is that our staff take these cases very seriously, and they're going to work with the RCMP to see how we can improve the situation. You've raised a number of very good points, and I think the main points is that we need to improve the coverage in our region, and the hours and so on. Well, as the municipal police, your own municipal police, they only work during the day. Melanson, I think it was Mr. Melanson, said, no, in the evening they only work when something happens. No, I think it's pretty well spread out. But anyhow, what I heard was that it's just daytime. But once again, eventually, because there's such growth, there's been a lot of construction, and because there's construction, there's a lot of theft. And I don't need to tell you this, but I did my research. The RCMP did studies saying that crime has not gone up this year compared to the past. But I've talked to everybody in Moncton and Ashford and so on. There's all sorts of crime that is just not reported. Ashford spent $200,000 from their pocket, out of their pocket, because it's the rise in their premiums, and it's the same thing for me. I didn't put in a claim because it was under $10,000, and I mean, when do you make a claim? Do you not? But anyhow, so there's a lot of crimes that are not reported. So that's why the statistics, well, that's one of the numerous problems. People don't take it seriously. Well, yeah, but they say, well, it's already happened. What's it going to do? What's it going to change? So, yeah, anyway, I don't want to stop you there, but I'm going to stop you there. Yeah. Okay. We have the information, and I'm sure we will follow up. The RCMP will follow up, and we can't change it overnight. No, but there are certain things that can be done. The things that don't cost anything either, like support services, education, things like that. I think that would be a good starting point. Yeah, there are a number of elements like that need to be looked at. I mean, so I hope that it never happens to you anyhow, because it's not a pleasant experience. Thank you. Questions from councillors? Councillor Gaudette. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Jason, for your presentation. And I think that something we could start with is perhaps the getting support. Perhaps, you know, like, for example, when something like this happens to you, you don't know who to call. What do you do? So perhaps we could have a contact person here at the municipality, somebody that you could call, who would, especially the psychological support. My daughter was traumatized, and we all were, but an adult has more. I mean, I understood, you know, that the criminal isn't going to come back to the house, but our kids don't know that, and of course their imaginations run wild, and the one who used to work here had said, well, you know, or one of my kids was saying, I keep dreaming that he's going to come back to the house with a knife in his hand. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't promise you that he's not, but you know, I mean, it's during the holidays. It can be during any other time. It can be March break. I mean, March break. So be careful. Crimes can happen. So education doesn't cost anything. You already have you know, you have the technology. You can give out these warnings. You can talk about it. The police phone number, the local police phone number. I mean, I would never have thought. Yeah, these are all things that have to be considered. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here this evening. And thank you for having talked to us about your history, your problem, your experience, and your for explaining how we can improve things. Thank you very much for coming here this evening, and have a great rest of the evening. Thank you. The next item, we're going to be talking about trees. Trees. Alexandre Truchon Savard. Welcome, Alexandre. And you brought your bodyguard? Always. I never leave home without him. You know Justin Poirier, our urban forest manager. So without any further ado, thank you for giving us this opportunity. We've been working on this project for a year with Stantec to develop a urban forestry management plan. It's our first one. And so I have Landon Black here with me from Stantec. I think Landon, yes, he's waving hello. Yeah. So Landon Black is going to help us present this report this evening. The objective this evening is to give you a summary of the analysis conducted by Stantec on our behalf on Dieppe's urban forest, and to present recommendations. We'll talk about the implementation we're looking to, and we'd ask for your feedback. Of course, we'll have a few weeks between today and when we present the report to council, and you'll be able to make your comments at that time as well. So for a summary of the current situation, I'll give this floor to Landon.
Can you hear you?
Landon? Okay.
Make the slide a little bit bigger on my end. Okay, I think I've got it. Okay, so yeah, thanks for having me. And as Alex said, I'll give you a brief sort of overview of the data regarding your urban forest. And we'll talk about some of the recommendations a little later on. So you can see on your screen right now, this is the canopy model for the whole city of Dieppe. And the darker the color of green that you see means a higher tree canopy, or it could be looked at as older, more sort of older growth forest stands. All the way down to the light sort of lime green, which is 2 to 4 meter trees which essentially large shrubs or very young regrowth of forests. So you can see the distribution of the taller trees tends to be further south and further east in the community. You have a little bit less of those remnant forest patches as you move downtown. And of course, along the river, it tends to be more saltwater marshes and less tree canopy. In total, you're at 61% canopy cover. And if we scope that down to the urban perimeter, it's about 40.8%. If you want to go to the next slide, Alex, I'll put that in perspective nationwide. It's very high nationwide. You can see a lot of the communities that have published data on this tend to come from Southern Ontario, which is largely agricultural land base. So whereas the outskirts of Dieppe and Moncton and Fredericton and Saint John all have largely forested surroundings, most of the cities like Guelph and London and Hamilton in Ontario have agricultural fields. So they don't have quite as big of a buffer. So you can see on this list, Fredericton and Halifax are quite similar to Dieppe in the fact that their city boundary actually covers quite a lot of forested area as well. Oh, I lost the slide there. Oh, there we go. So sorry, yeah, there's quite a lot of forest cover within that. Now, but even comparing those communities to Dieppe, you've got a lot higher forest cover within the urban area. So all of these numbers that you're seeing in comparative communities, that's really should be compared with your 61% total that you have. So if you look at it that way, only Fredericton is actually really comparable to Dieppe out of this list. If you took the actual downtown portions of many of these other communities, it would be significantly lower. So that's a very positive thing. You can go to the next slide, please. Here's a couple other visuals to help understand some of the finer points of the urban forest canopy. So the image on the right-hand side is it illustrates impervious surface and things that cannot have trees grow on them, including the river. But you should be able to pick out things like the airport in there and the Champlain Center downtown as largely impervious area. And the buildings are outlined on there because a good way to look at urban forest canopy distribution is in regards to the human population of the city. And we tend to look at that in terms of buildings. The reasons why that is important is because obviously the more of your land area that's covered in buildings, the less area there is to have canopy grown from it. So you'll see a decrease in canopy cover as the building footprints expand. But the real difference in communities that manage the urban forest really well and the ones that do it less well is how well they still get canopy where there are high building densities. And the way to do that is to do things such as retain trees during construction, limit grading that's done as a means to an end of building, but doesn't necessarily have to be there for the building itself, limiting sprawling parking lots, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what the image on the left-hand side of the screen is showing. You can see that the Champlain Center area, sector 1, it has definitely the highest building cover. followed by the northern area there in orange, and then followed again by yellow and various shades of green. And if you recall back to the 2 slides previous, that's largely mirroring the distribution of the urban forest canopy. So part of the reason why it's important is areas that have a lot of impervious surface and not a lot of canopy tend to create heat island effects, which can have negative outcomes on people's health and the health of the community. And it can also make it harder to grow the trees that you are trying to grow down there in those areas, because of course, many of our native species to the area also struggle with heat island effects. Next slide, please. So this graphic is trying to show you the equity of the distribution of trees within Dieppe. It's modeled on a methodology from the States that's been applied throughout the entire United States, and we've been converting some of the data to suit Canada, because our census is a little bit different than the American census with the fields that it collects. So we've been using data from University Laval, which shows urban heat, demographic characteristics of each of the smaller census units within Dieppe, and the canopy cover model. And basically we're combining all of that data to give an equity score. So what you're seeing on the screen now is areas in the dark green. Those are areas where the canopy of the urban forest is meeting what your expectations. And the expectations goes back to how much land is used for the building footprints. So it doesn't necessarily mean that those areas have the highest canopy cover, although it does mirror that in this case, but it means that the expectation is being met. Those are areas where you wouldn't need to focus as much of your effort on getting things up to par with the rest. Areas in a dark red, on the other hand, are some of the areas that are performing the least well compared to those expectations. So you think if I pick on sector 1 again, the Champlain Center has a large building footprint, but it's accompanied with an even larger amount of surrounding impervious surfaces, the asphalt parking lot, and very little tree canopy. So even though it's got quite a big building footprint on it, it still scores quite poorly because all of the impervious area that it has doesn't really support any canopy. And as a result, there's an urban heat island effect there. I mean, demographically, it isn't very densely populated. It's more sectors 2 and 3 that have people beside it. But this is basically just a tool of scoping your efforts of the urban forest to ensure fairness for all members of the community. Alex, next slide, please. Oh, I guess I'm handing it back to you for this part. Oh, no, sorry, Matt. It's still me.
Yep.
This is just a little bit more about the species that actually make up your urban forest. So you can see the top species there. So sorry, just to back up a second, these are a combination of the percent of the population, the number of those tree species within the community, and the leaf surface area. So the leaf surface area is just, if you imagine plucking every leaf off of a tree, laying them flat, and then taking the area that covers. It's quite a high number, actually, with large trees. So if you take the overall percentage of basically leaves in the town from a single species and add it to the percentage of the population of that species, you get what we're calling the importance value. It doesn't mean importance in the sense that some of these species are more important, either culturally or economically or environmentally than others, it means I like to frame it as more of a risk. So you can see the Norwegian maple is #1 in terms of importance value in Dieppe right now. If there was to be a disease that impacted Norway maple and you lost all of them, you're losing 35 out of 200 importance value points, meaning that of all the services and benefits these trees are giving to the people, you'd be losing a significant chunk of them. And importantly, maples, as an example, as a group, are often impacted by the same diseases or pests. Same with ash as a group. There's various species of both group. So you can see there's 2 maples at the top of the leaderboard here. So you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket in terms of tree species, and wherever possible, you like to prioritize native species as well, because native species tend to have a higher ecological value, and that's in large part because all of the things that interact with those tree species, such as other flora and fauna, they're used to those species, whereas things from other continents, though they're not as used to and may not use them to the same extent, and that just has ripple effects through the whole ecosystem. Okay, next slide. Okay, a little info on Dieppe's projected climate, because this factors into building that resilience through the species palette, the various species that I just showed you. Some of them are more adapted to the projected climate, and some of them are less. So if you look at some of these statistics, the long-term projection for Dieppe is a warmer average temperature in every month, and higher precipitation averages as well. So just think warmer and wetter. If you look to the bottom row, you're currently in zone 5B, which for plant hardiness, if Alex, you go to the next slide, this will put that into a little bit of context. So 5B is that kind of mustardy yellow. And if we look back in time to 1970, Dieppe was kind of on the border of that 5B and 4. So, and now you're basically on the other cusp of that 5B, almost going into 5A and almost going into 5B. That projection was for 2080 to be 7A, I believe, which you can just see on the 2010 map down on the southeast coast of Nova Scotia. So that would be the approximate, if you want, if anybody knows the climate of southeast Nova Scotia, that would be somewhat more what you would expect in Dieppe, and a slight transition of the species that are really well suited to that. Now, there is a certain moderating effect in large woodlands. So it's sometimes proposed that we do a sort of a man-made transition of species and start planting species from further south into the forests to help them on their way. I'm not a proponent of that, because these large forests tend to moderate their own climate to some degree. However, if you look at the environments that a lot of street trees grow up in, they of course have higher heat because their entire root zone is basically The sun can shine all the way in there the whole time, whereas in a forest, it's largely shaded. So you have a lot of moisture retained. It's not the same case on a street. And it's even worse on a street too, because a lot of the moisture that would have fallen in the soil and been held there has actually fallen on the road and then it's been taken away in catch basins or just overland flow away from the soil. So they're kind of living in a state of drought a lot of the time with elevated heat. So they're already getting the worst impacts of a changing climate before things even, progress further. So in that sense, it does make sense to experiment with trees that are a little bit more suited to those climates in street areas because, and it will be a little bit of trial and error to see which ones thrive based on soil conditions and everything else. But it's also a balancing act because just because you can't look to the 2080 weather and plan a forest based on that if it will be killed next year by a freaky cold winter, for example. Alex, if you want to go to the next one.
So from here, I can take over, Landon?
Yes, perfect.
Donc ici, je vais
Here, I'm going to be summarizing the elements that are coming out of our management plan with the strengths and the risks that we're exposed to. So quickly, as Landon has just explained, we have a wide canopy coverage in lands that aren't developed, which is an advantage for us, even though we have urban forest canopy. And so we are doing proactive management. We have decades of experience in planting on private and public lands. And we also have excellent cooperation amongst all services. We have species diversity. You saw the table of trees and species. We are not only have ornamental, but we have native species on street and in park trees. And the plan illustrates some good partnerships with local groups to promote civic responsibility. The risks we are dealing with, well, we have pests and diseases, and even if ash trees is threatened by, is not a big tree in the canopy, the ash trees are threatened by the emerald ash borer, and we have limited resources to manage it here in New Brunswick. With regard to staff and resources, we need for human resources to maintain an ideal maintenance cycle. And I'm happy to tell you that our second forestry technician has started today. And if you meet her, I would be happy to introduce her to you. But we have needs to reevaluate these resources on a continuous basis. We work with a lot of non-native species, Norway maple, but it's still important to keep them in our natural spaces. There's a progression there. We've already mentioned this several times, the fact that there are heat islands in areas with insufficient canopy to cover creating urban heat islands. I'm going to do a very quick update on the bylaw because it's not covered by the management plan, but we want to have more coverage and we want to deal with the whole canopy management. But up until now, we have about 60,000 square meters of protected forest cover protected by the bylaw, either on public lands or in yards or other lots that have been developed. For new builds, there are 1,800 trees that are going to be planted or have been planted. And I'm talking about the last 3 years since it was passed. There are 15,000 square meters of canopy lost on residential lands. We did assessments on the lots of these trees in areas where there have been buildings, like Landon has just said. This is where the forest cover is more difficult to keep. So we've had some losses there, but so we need to find the means to understand this. Through the process of the tree bylaw and the requirements for planting, there have been $136,000 that came through private financial compensation, and we can go and plant trees along the street and work in the zones where equity is not as strong. So this is good for us, and we also have the same rigor for engineering projects. So through creating new streets and new infrastructure, there were trees of interest cut. We calculated the same rate for planting along streets. And so if it's taking some time to happen, funds have been transferred to our service in order to provide for tree planting along Boulevard Dieppe and other reconstructions of streets. $34,000 has been collected in permit fees, and this is being sent to plant trees as well. Let me move on to recommendations to move on to concrete specific actions that we can work with. The first are operational recommendations. We recommend to continue to maintain our urban inventory. So these are geomatic requirements, and inventory needs to be kept up to date. So this work is ongoing. We also recommend to continue working with engineering to improve standards, engineering standards, and this will be spoken about later on this evening, and also to do an operational review annually to assess whether our service level is maintained or adequate, and also to provide for the service level of work for staff. Looking at partnerships, with regard to outside cooperations, we want to continue to work with our partners and having sustainable relationships with our local partners and also external ones in order to look at long-term agreements involving ISA certification. We also want to continue our dialogue with First Nations. I have a slide with regard to their contribution to the management plan and also working with co-management interests and using their knowledge for tree planting in natural environments. All this to bring back the Wabanaki Acadian forest, and we're working with the native species to find a forest composition which is more natural. We have challenges with our tree and seed suppliers. We can only supply with what is on the market. So we want to create a demand so suppliers can adjust, but we continue to work with them in order to continue to have access to these tree and seed suppliers of native species. Looking at planning, this is the third component of our recommendation. This is where I think we will have an opportunity with the current canopy to continue its protection and maximize its protection. So we want to maintain and improve the tree bylaw to provide for protection standards for preserved trees. We continue to work on that. And I'll be looking at the targets according to the municipal sector. So to measure and see if it's maintained, and to work with the planning sector to review the municipal plan in order to identify sustainable management zones in rezone sectors, and this matches with the presentation which follows mine. With regard to Indigenous engagement, we had an opportunity to consult with the DTI on establishing this plan. We have used their recommendations, and I also want to say that the Indigenous knowledge study has just been received, and we're looking at it through DTI to integrate this knowledge adapted to our policies. We're going to be working with the co-management opportunities for future nature parks and the return of the Wabanaki Acadian Forest. In the city, we use the same 18 sectors and the canopy targets by sector. The objective here is to present the state of the canopy in 2025. We were able to measure it, and in 10 years' time, what we hope to attain, what is achievable based on what we know about developments that are coming forward. In Sector 1, which is the commercial area, even if we were to plant 100,000 trees in 10 years, they would not have the time to develop in order to provide us with a canopy that would give us a big enough change in the percentage. But if we begin to plant trees, maybe we can replace some impermeable surfaces and we can increase the canopy in those areas. There are a lot of public spaces where this could grow. Sector 2 is downtown, where canopy was low. We are going to be working with replanting and working with private owners to plant in their backyards, because this is where we have more opportunity and space to do that. Sector 3 and 10 in yellow are industrial sectors. This isn't where people live. People work there. So it's nice to see and maintain a certain percentage of the canopy in order to have a nice work area. But once again, there are vacant lands, and we know there will be future development. So it risks reduction in sectors 3 and 10. So sectors 12, 13, and 14 in yellow, these are sectors which are mainly completely developed and for which we're going to have to work at planting alongside streets or to encourage planting in backyards. The rest is in green. If we say that there's percentage of 30%, which is the normally standard we look for throughout the city itself. So by way of summary, canopy maintenance is the biggest part of the work we plan to do, and to diversify planted species to strengthen climate resilience. Resource management is important for us because we have to work in cooperation with not only our internal services, but contractors to make sure that our trees are kept healthy and in good shape. And finally, to continue our engagement and planning at the community level, to work with the community and Indigenous communities and use the best modern technologies possible to improve management. So for implementation, let me tell you what's coming up soon. We're doing the public presentation today. In March, we're coming back with the plan for council submission. We're happy to talk it over with you. And this summer, as I was mentioning, we're going to be integrating our new forestry technologies. We'll also be working at continuing to plant street trees. There are campaigns that have been held in the past. The community program of planting continues. The requests have started to come in already. Justin is going to coordinate that as well. We're looking at integration of the tree inventory through inventory projects and mapping them. And then we have the municipal plan review, which is coming as well. That's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. And here's some pictures. So the same area, but the same number of houses, but certainly not the same canopy. So what can we do to bring the left picture closer to what it looks like in the right-hand picture? Thank you. Questions by council members? Councillor Turgeon. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, and bravo. You know, we've been doing this now for 3 years, and to see how this project has been so well developed. With regard to urban planting along streets, what kind of trees are you selecting? Because we have a lot of maple trees, and so what are we choosing now for streets? Let me give you my planting expert right here. We're going to try and plant more native species. The last project that we had, there were ash, ginkgo, maple. We also had another species which the interpreter didn't hear. And so these are the formats we need to do. We try and vary from year to year. our order has been already put in. We have a couple of different ones this year, but those are the 4 that we had put in last year, and we're going to try and change it up a little. With regard to private lands, I'm in a neighborhood where it's a little older. We have a lot of trees. And so how are you doing the inventory? How do you see this happening according to your statistics and your counting? We have no concrete measures with regard to identifying these types of trees on private lands. These are people who took the time to go and measure the trees, put them on the platform as part of the inventory. Some people put in hundreds of trees in that are growing on their lands, and others did as best they could. And from this, we have information with the number of trees available throughout the province. So this gives us the height. But now with the mobile van, which is going to go out with these measurements, this is going to allow us to see what's happening in private yards and canopies, forest canopy behind and in front of the house. This is going to be added to the street canopy, and we'll add that to the private side as well. Thank you. That's interesting as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lise Le Boutier. Thank you, Your Worship. Well, congratulations on the plan. It's very detailed. I do have 2 questions. At the very beginning of the presentation, you compared different cities. And when I look at this, I say, well, how did you choose these? Because some of these cannot really be compared to Dieppe. I mean, if you see Montreal, Toronto, I mean, how did they choose them? How were they chosen? How come they didn't just choose municipalities that were the same size as us in order to have a true comparison? Well, there is no public database of the cities like that. So these figures came from other analysis, other studies that were public. So our tech was able to collect them, but through a literature review. But there aren't very many municipalities of our size that are lucky enough to be able to, and proactive enough to be able to measure them and put the figures on their, put numbers on their canopy. But it's difficult, I understand, when we compare ourselves to large cities. If you look at the boundary and you're looking at 2030, 2036 here, and it seems that some of these numbers are going down. Yes, there are developments that are going to take place. There are some vacant land that are going to be developed. We've worked with the planning, urban planning, and the urban growth strategy. We're projecting that there's going to be 1,500 new units, housing units. What impact is that in a certain sector? What impact is that going to have on the canopy? So of course it's going to go down, but that's where we got our figures. And of course it's going to go down in a number of the sectors, but where we have to work is we have to make sure we retain as many as we can and replant them as right after the construction in order to maintain our canopy. I'd like to come back to a point and then I'll stop after that. Quite often we look at development and land for public purposes, and that's always an option depending on what we need, what we have as parks. But why, or could we have a study on why we would not always choose to have land for public purposes in order to have greater density in the longer term? And perhaps that would be a strategy. Yeah, this is something that is being discussed with the committees on development and when new subdivisions are proposed. But our report is going to be part of the complete analysis, the comprehensive analysis of any new projects that come in that are presented. So yes, I will take note of that. Thank you very much. Councillor Gaudette. Yes, thank you. I was looking at all of this and it's interesting, but I have trouble seeing what it's going to look like later, because this 60% in green is more towards the south and the east. we know that it's not developed yet, and the trend now is, you know, well, in the older neighborhoods, there are a lot of trees towards the western side because they're single-family homes that have trees. They've let their trees grow, but with the trend being row houses and apartment buildings, we really have to try and continue to look at what we can develop, because we can't. I know we can't maintain the tree coverage 100% because 3/4 of this map hasn't been developed yet. Well, that's very true. In the urban boundary, we're at 40% actually. So in the developable zone, but there are still a number of properties within the urban boundary that have not yet been developed. So that's where we're going to work with the urban growth strategy, to see which sectors are more mature, which are stable. But for example, in sector 2, in the old Dieppe, it's only 17%, even though it's mostly single family homes. There's a couple of larger trees on some properties, but nobody has a big wooded area, forest in their backyard. So we have to work there to increase that as well. In new subdivisions, as Councillor Boutier mentioned, in our land for public purposes, we have to make sure that we maintain a canopy, and that's what I was presenting in my statistics as well on the bylaw. The bylaw is that we're not going to have any properties that are just clear cut. We're working with lots here that are often wooded to begin with, and then we determine where the land for public purposes is going to be, and then we determine if we need parks or sports fields, and we're going to look at within that. And you're going to look at keeping the maximum number of trees possible, because a planted tree is only going to be big in 20 or 30 years. So we have to make sure that we keep our trees and our forests. So going forward, we have to make sure that we keep the greatest number of trees possible. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Janin. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the quality of the information presented. There's a lot of information here, and that's going to be very helpful in your planning. As every time I look at the map here, of course, I think of the whole city, of course, but in these heat islands where it's the greatest danger lies, are there any data on the impact of these heat islands on the city? What does it mean for the health of our citizens? Is there any information? Are there any data available on that? Well, I'd have to look at Horizon and Vitalité, because we just had a presentation at the FMNB from the Health Network on the effect of climate change on health. But has it caused illness or mortality specifically from these heat islands? That's a good question. I'll see if I can find an answer. I understand that there's a lot of complexity here. The fact that there's the CF Champlain is there, and the whole zone 2, the downtown area, that's a little more complicated to go plant trees there. But can we imagine that we'd go beyond these figures? For example, it says up to 5%, which is there a way that we could be a little more aggressive and go even higher? Well, we can. But Landon didn't mention it, but this is one of the figures that came out in Toronto. They planted 1 million trees, but the needle didn't really move, because at the same time you're losing trees. So the trees get old, they're damaged, they're injured. So you have to be realistic as well. So when in our objective 2036, it's going to be difficult to see a big major difference, but we're going to go yes, as much as we can. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you, and to council for their questions. Unless you have anything else, we're going to move to the next item. Thank you. Presentation now by on the recreation master plan. No, sorry. Oh, I wasn't sure. Is it? No, I'm not either.
Voilà.
Here we go. Oh, sorry. That's okay. Thank you. So I'm here this evening to give you a presentation on the Dieppe South Master Plan. And it's connected to Alexandre's presentation just now, as he mentioned. Just to explain, the Dieppe South, this is called a secondary plan. You've talked about it, you've heard about it already, the secondary plan. And internally, we decided it was better to call it a master plan rather than a secondary plan for Dieppe South. So this is what we're going to talk about this evening, Dieppe South Master Plan. This, to explain the context, you can see on this map everything that is south of Leblanc Road. So it's the extension of Dieppe Boulevard. And what identifies this sector here? Well, you can see the Petitcodiac River, of course. That's notable. And Amiro Road and Dover Road. Those are the two major thoroughfares here. There's also a built framework, a built environment along Leblanc Road. There are certain subdivisions throughout the sector. There are new infrastructures coming. Why? Because Dieppe Boulevard will be extended, and there will be a new water tower, and there will be a number of natural elements in the sector. These are all factors that were taken into consideration in this study. Here we see the context. The plan was adopted in 2025. We were to adopt a secondary plan, which is now called the master plan for Dieppe South. In December 2024, there was an agreement with CMHC. There were some initiatives that council agreed to, and that was to develop a secondary plan for the Dieppe South. In February 2025, the work began on this master plan. In May and June, there were public information and consultation sessions. There were also consultations through the Urban Growth Strategy Group. In June 2025, there was submission by CCNB and Innov Ecological Study. The council got the mandate to incorporate the study into our regulations. And in November 2025, there was the submission of the Urban Growth Strategy to council with a mandate to incorporate the recommendations into our regulatory framework. Once again, the master plan will be a part of this. In January, just a few weeks ago, there was another public information session where we presented the results, the document that you will be receiving here this evening. So the ecology of the area, well, as was mentioned, we conducted a study in partnership with CCNB Innov to identify the ecological value of different sites. It proposes different ecological planning scenarios, for example, by including nodes and corridors. And we had the mandate to take the results into account. So we integrated this into the land use planning exercise. Following that, we had the Dieppe South, the master plan that we worked with the upland, where we concluded population growth projections over a 30-year horizon. We identified different sectors that were conducive to growth based on the zoning. And then we realized that, and of course, by taking into consideration the extension of Dieppe Boulevard, this was done throughout the territory. It distributes growth across the territory, and the council mandate was to take the results into account. Here, I'm showing you the major elements of the urban growth strategy for the different sectors that correspond to the Dieppe South here. You can see on the left, you can see the extension of Dieppe Boulevard, the different sectors identified here. And on the right-hand side, you can see the Dover Road area. So this is just to explain the context. What is the Dieppe South Master Plan? I mentioned it already, but I didn't tell you what it was. Well, it's a planning document that'll establish a vision for the development of the area. It'll give a land use map, a conceptual land use map that will define the overall concepts for the development for the different parts of the territory. There's a municipal assets map, and then the key development principles. This is a document that's going to look like the municipal plan, in effect, where you'll see different principles for the land development of the land. But it's not a zoning bylaw. So this isn't the zoning per se, this map. The zoning will be adopted later. The document will help guide the zoning that will then be adopted. And so the adoption of this master plan will not automatically result in a change in zoning. It'll serve as a guide for drafting zoning regulations. So we're not going to go into as much detail as a zoning bylaw might, but we'll see the overall vision for the future. So it'll give us a coherent vision for the area if we look at the land use, the enhancement of natural and community assets, and a sound management of municipal infrastructure. And I apologize here. I know you can only see, you can't see very well. We often work in portraits mode here, so you can't really see the detail, but you can see the overall area. It's a conceptual land use map. As I mentioned here, we're not looking at property lines. It's just to have an overall development concept. And we're going to follow this as much as possible when we go look at the zoning, but the lines might move somewhat. So when we come back with zoning, we're just going to follow the overall principles, the overarching principles and the concepts that are presented here. And then I will look at each of these colors to show you what they represent. You can see the north is Chemin Leblanc and Dieppe Boulevard, the extension that crosses Amiro Rope that is in dark pink, and then Dover Road is towards the south, just so everybody follows here. Now there's a transition of the built environment here. Now, of course, in a real context, I mean, you'll see streets and trees. This isn't a real picture, but it's just to show the transition between the different types of buildings that will be in the different areas. And now I'm going to talk about the conservation. The dark green was the conservation areas. That's the environmental conservation zone, the EC zone that already exists, that includes wetlands of provincial significance. What is most protected here? And these are very strict regulations, and you cannot build in these sectors. And then there's a new, we're proposing a new area of sustainable management. And this is what we got from the CCNB Innov data. There, we've identified certain targets with the objective of preserving 20% of the territory. This is a new concept altogether. This is something that doesn't exist at this time in Dieppe's zoning bylaw. We're including 20% of the territory here. This is a sector where there are limited development possibilities. So it might be one house, one single family home per 5 acres or 20,000 square meters. So this is what is allowed currently in the RA zone. So we're not taking away the right of the owner, but we're not allowing more development. And there's going to be restrictions on the land use. For example, if somebody wants to develop a building with one single family home on 5 acres, they're not going to be allowed to clear cut the whole property. There's going to be limits on the positioning of the house, on the different development possibilities. But it's what you see here in pale green, in light green. And this is really based on scenarios that were identified by INOV. Now, as well, in that sector, we're not going to allow the development of new streets. For example, when you see these black lines, these are collector roads that are proposed, but we are proposing that only these collector roads and arterial roads will be able to go through the new zone in order to limit the fractioning, the division of this territory to maximize its protection. And through the secondary plan, we're proposing that we review all of the municipal teams that might be used to protect these sectors further. So the zoning bylaw in here, there will also be the tree bylaw, of course. There'll be the possibility of assessing the acquisition of property, which is the best way of protecting them. There'll be standards for retention ponds, for example. So there's going to be standards on streets that go through. We don't want to promote connectivity in these sectors. So it's really a reassessment of all of the municipal tools in order to promote the protection of these sectors. So this is really to give an overall of global vision to the whole area. And then we have Dieppe Boulevard. Here you can see Dieppe Boulevard. What you see over here, that's the extension of what currently exists along Dieppe Boulevard. So you think of multi-family homes, dwellings, commercial buildings as well. And we've also identified some intensification nodes. These sectors would be closer to the upper town, for example. Here, we insist on or require commercial use on the ground floor and to promote pedestrian activity. For example, in uptown sort of thing behind the co-op. So this is the kind of what we're trying to recreate here along Dieppe Boulevard, is to create these nodes of more intense design, a more intense intensification. And there would be design criteria to make sure that's something that is attractive for residents, for pedestrians. And so if you probably recognize here on the left, and then on the right, there's another building that you can see that has different heights, different elements. There's a commercial use on the ground floor. This is the kind of thing we'd like to see in this sector, especially along these intensification nodes. Now, along the urban center here, which would be right along Dieppe Boulevard mostly, this is where there's the highest density development. So you can see that it'll be limited within the boundary of these future proposed collector roads. So the density of this development wouldn't come towards the existing developments, the existing sectors, but it would be towards the future collector roads. And that's where we'd see the greatest number of multifamily dwellings with larger size buildings. And we're going to really focus on these transitional sectors as well. You can see the transition here in the colors, and we're going to focus on design. For example, there's a building that you see in Dieppe along Gauvin, and this is a picture from elsewhere. This is the kind of building, the kind of size building that we can expect in this sector. And then along the collector roads, we're proposing transition areas, urban transition. We could have multifamily dwellings, but that are a little smaller, but are still multifamily dwellings that would allow a transition towards the smaller built environment. Here, for example, mid-height, this is what we see in Dieppe already, 3-story apartment buildings. We're not talking about 6 stories here, but we're not talking about single family homes either, but maybe 3-story buildings, as you see here. And that's what you see in light brown. And then you see yellow, which is the semi-urban area. And here, this is really smaller, with smaller multi-family dwellings, row homes, for example, and possibly single-family homes as well. So we're talking about 12-unit apartment buildings, for example. And then here, what you see is the suburban area. Well, that's most of the territory. This is what's already been developed and what has been identified as necessary for growth over the next 30 years. And this is included in the suburban sectors. And here we'd focus on single family or two-family homes. And it's not the whole territory, but it would be within the urban boundary. So this hasn't been identified as necessary to reach the needs of the housing needs over the next 30 years, but it's a certain part of it could be included in the urban boundary, but the rest we need a study to understand well. Okay, if we need to develop certain areas and keep a built-up area that is smaller in these sectors. So it's really there will be development opportunities, but they're always meeting certain standards, and it will be a smaller buildings, but it would include the areas that are already developed and existing subdivisions. And just to show you a difference between the transition between semi-urban and suburban, here you can see single and two-family homes with 2-story homes or 2.5 stories. And in the semi-urban, there might be 3-story apartment buildings. And when you're in the transition area to the suburban, in the transition area, it could be limited to 2 stories, for example, to have a gradual intensification. So these are the kind of things that we're proposing here. This is something that could be present in the future zoning bylaw. And then we have the Amiraux corridor in red and dark pink here. This was talked about in the urban growth strategy. We recognize that there's a specific context here in Amiraux. This is an existing area with the there are not a great number of vacant properties along Amiraux, but it's a major road. It's an arterial road, and what we wanted to do here is to recommend a study of the corridor, because yes, it's recognized that it's an important roadway. It's an existing context. There could be future development, but it's already an existing built environment. So we have to do whatever any development that does take place has to respect this sector as it exists. So we want to identify what are the main characteristics. Do the buildings have a certain size, a certain form? Are there certain characteristics that are found in the existing buildings in such a way that future development would respect these same elements, but might allow a greater number of housing units? Would that be possible in the existing context of the sector? And it's similar for what we're proposing for the Dover corridor. Now, Dover is not as developed as Amiraux, but it's important for the municipality. It's an existing roadway. It's an existing context already, and so we recommend a study to study it further, in the same way as we did for Amiraux. Chemin Leblanc Road, a little more to the north here, which is in gray. It's in specific context. It's an existing and complete built environment. It does not have water and sewer, and we're not planning on installing them as well. So we want to maintain the existing context along Leblanc Road. And the last color here on the map, which is the community. And right now there's Dover Park here, but we're expecting a designation that will recognize the importance of different community assets in the sector. And we're talking about reach here, the municipal reach, not only within the sector, but within the whole municipality. Dover Park is one that we have to highlight. If there are any new assets, or if Dover Park could become bigger, that would be interesting. Now, we wanted to add value to existing community assets. Now, this is something that brings us beyond the preceding map, but we want people to appreciate and use the Petitcodiac River. We want people to, we want it to be enhanced. We want to add value to the wetlands and the riverfront trail, and this is the visual. This is important. We want to protect that if there were any type of development on these properties, we want to make sure that we have the visual aspect is maintained along this river. There's also the enhancement of the ecological assets. Now we're coming back to sustainable management that's already been presented, but we identify this as a natural movement space for humans, but also for wildlife and for flora. So we identify each area that it might be, we could have a collector road or an arterial road, like as being barriers of connectivity where there's conflict between these road connectivity. And so we want to pay specific attention to this to make sure that the ecological connectivity can still take place. And then there's the enhancement of community hubs as well. We've already talked about the Dover Park, which is a major municipal asset, but also the development of a community hub along Dieppe Boulevard, for example. If that can be take form, it's something that would attract people. It would be a place where people could come together. So this is what you see here in purple. There'd be greater density of housing units, yes, but also the presence of commercial uses as well could attract people. So next steps then would be to present the plan, the master plan to council in March, and then we'll prepare the bylaws for the municipal plan and for the zoning bylaw that'll come later, and then prepare zoning bylaws for probably in the fall, and we could probably give development permits starting next winter. If you have any comments or questions, please. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Jeannin.
Thank you for presenting this plan. My question is about the environment that we want to conserve. Like in slide 40, you're talking about conserving a certain percentage as objective and a possibility of acquiring lands. And so we're also talking about putting forward community assets. So it's an opportunity to see urban growth there. Are we going to be identifying a place where there could be another natural park or something which would help citizens who live there have quick access to a natural environment? Clearly, as the sustainable management sectors have been identified, but beyond that, in all cases, there will be the process for lands for public purposes. And in these areas, there will be parks or lands that will be taken for parks or trails. So these lands will be preserved as well. Even if we talk about a community pool, you can't think that everything is going to be built up. When the owners of these lands want to subdivide, then we'll be allowed our 10% of lands for public service, for public purposes. At this point, it's difficult to identify these lands early on without knowing what the needs are in that moment. But these will be done according to the development schedule. So it's important to see and foresee these things as much as possible. So to have a natural park, yes, we have put up play parks for children in the city, but we have to maintain areas where you can just want to sit down and commune with nature. We have had meetings in the development committee to talk about this because it's a new area, if I may express it that way, and to look at what we're going to be promoting as our committee once we get our first requests for subdivisions in that area. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Worship, and thank you for this presentation. I really like the work that you've done to develop this master plan for this part of the city. I had the same question as Councillor Genet, but I have two others as well. You mentioned in your presentation that its urban growth strategy is similar to a municipal plan. Is it not part of the municipal plan? No, in fact, the growth strategy is a complementary document which provides us with more information to allow us to make better decisions. The first plan is a legal document and it oversees all the planning documents for the municipality. So these are documents, and the master plan in some way is a document which is outside of that legal framework, but one that we can rely on to see the municipal plan, review it, and also zoning bylaws as well. Thank you. My second question is, can we expect that there will be also a master plan for the eastern part of the city at one point in time? For the eastern part of the city? Greater Lakeburn. Well, if we're talking about Greater Lakeburn, it was added to the city by way of annexation, and it's been incorporated in a way that we knew that the revision of the municipal plan was going to come up. What's interesting for that area, it's an important municipal thing that's happening soon, and we needed to justify the master plan with a focus on that sector. If there were a plan to bring municipal infrastructure to that area, I think it would be appropriate to have a very specific plan focused on the Greater Lakeburn area. But there won't be a master plan for that area. Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. I have three questions. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was really interesting to see the structure and the vision. Question one, the percentage of each of these zones represents what? It would be good if we had that, because when we look at the urban area, does it represent 50%? Well, for example, I mentioned the fact that we have the true percentage and we haven't calculated for all. It's a figure that we could bring forward once we table this document, but it could be misleading to look at it as a whole when we talk about sustainable development, which represents 20% of the land. So you still have to keep this in mind. You can see the most important color, even if it's perhaps less joined in a block, it's a suburban, the beige, if you will, which is where we would have a single family and other double occupancy buildings, but that's a major part of the land right now. I'm noting that you want the percentages. You can just an overview of what the changes are and what's being proposed in that area. I'm talking about zoning. I haven't been through the whole new system. I've been around for 9 years, but I think this is the first time that we're going to be looking at this as a whole. How is it going to work? And the question which brings me there is because the lands already belong to the residents. They've been zoned, but to rezone the land, you're going to come and say is R1 and it's going to be RH. So the majority of those lands are outside the urban, so they're in RA, which is rural zone. The idea here is not to do this overnight and to put a zoning on that whole area. We have to consider how the infrastructure is going to be added in. So we wanted to bring forward the vision for this area, but we weren't ready to necessarily change the zoning, because once the zoning is developed, if someone asks for a permit and the infrastructure isn't there, we have to issue the permit because the use reflects the zonage. So it allows us to have a period of transition for this, and also there will be a phasing in and how the infrastructure is going to be added in. The idea is to propose, it will be a city initiative, but in this area, we're going to begin to open up this area, change the zoning, and so we're going to bring forward proposals and contact the owners of these lots, and it's going to be presented. We're going to be contacting and informing the public in the same way that we do it when we do an amendment to a zoning bylaw. With regard to the consultation that was done in this area, we sent out notices to all owners of property in that area. We've informed the people through this information communication about what's happening. Great. For the urban zone, are we looking at advancing an RH zoning? And if so, are we going to be looking at changing? I know we've already discussed this previously, but are we looking at buffer zones and much greater than we have right now in order to avoid, I'm not talking about mistakes, but we learn as we go. We look at the different zones, especially when we have an RHM proposal, what we want on these lands. And I think, as we have done in the past, looking at making a buffer zone bigger so that we protect our residents. Once again, the secondary plan does not specify buffer zones. It's a major principle to have respectful transitions and bigger and smaller neighborhoods. In the document, in the language that's being used, what will it represent with regard to regulatory matters? This is something that's going to be put forward when we amend the zoning bylaw. You can see this as a high level. We're high up, we're looking at this zoning bylaw from a very high level, and we're looking at this map without taking into account property lines. Here, the lines exist. What we want is that the zoning bylaw respect that vision, but is the line going to be exactly at the same place as it is in a zoning bylaw? It could be moved according to reality and the actual lot line. So this is a high-level document. We are issuing principles about what we want to see in the various areas. I just want to confirm, so it'll all be done at the same time. Thank you. And I just want to add, with regard to the zoning bylaw, the same process will follow where we have public hearings and a legal process of passing these bylaws. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands for questions. And so thank you for this presentation. I think this when we think about the future, it calls to us, and we know that we have some amount of work ahead of us. And when we think about the Dieppe of 25, 30, 40 years ago, it's not quite what we thought it was going to be. So we have to keep our minds open in all areas. So excellent work. Thank you. We appreciate this very much for those of us who will come after us. Thank you and good evening. Could we take a quick 5-minute break? Just for a sec, we're going to, okay, 5 minutes, and by 5 minutes, I mean 5 minutes.
Reprendre, continuer.
Good evening again, everyone. Let's continue and move forward. Now, unless I'm mistaken, and someone can correct me, now it is the presentation for the how we figure out who we give our money to and when. Oh, someone's turned off the mic. We were away for a moment or two. Thank you for welcoming here this meeting and determine how we are going to be distributing grant money. I want to introduce the two students who are here with me this evening, Malcolm and Simon. They are students at the University of Moncton, Tourism and Leisure Management and Sport. They were with us for 4 months, and one of their objectives was to come and see a meeting of council, and they'll be back in March. So I just wanted to introduce them here and tell you that they were here this evening. The project I'm talking about tonight is something that we worked on, and Ms. Haché was there, and another colleague who was very involved in what we're presenting here this evening. So the new policy for community grants, it clarifies and modernizes the way we support community organizations. So we had many possibilities. We thought maybe it was high time to modernize these things and ensure that we are consistent and fair and transparent in the use of municipal funds. A few years ago, we had an external consultation report which assessed all the existing policies in Dieppe, and they had recommendations. Some of these recommendations are there, and what we noted was that there was an absence of clear and established policies and with regard to accountability, and also there was a lack of information for our community organizations. And also we wanted to harmonize and repeal existing policies. 4 or 5 of them were there. We wanted to harmonize them and repeal some of them with the arrival of the new policies. And over the years, and municipal council members also had lots of feedback. You have comments on what you see, what you want, what you hope to see. And we wanted to put all these comments within the new policy. The objectives of developing the policy, internally, we had objectives for policy, but also for us as an internal team. We wanted to standardize community grant applications, ensure fair and transparent evaluation, clarify applicable processes and tools, align financial supports with municipal priorities, harmonize existing municipal policies, and ensure responsible management of public funds. So this is what we internally were looking for, and we wanted to accomplish through what we're presenting here tonight. It's important to say this because it was a suggestion in the report that we got a few years ago. So we consulted internally. We went to validate our work. So we consulted about 10 community organizations and looked at different categories, different individuals who had different knowledge, those who worked in the social area. We looked at a variety of things. We had minor hockey, Maison des Jeunes, CAFI. There were 7 in all. We sat down one afternoon and we looked at the policy. We received their comments. The policy was well received. We got all kinds of comments from them. We were certainly not able to put all the recommendations into place because we had a little bit more context, but we were still able to make changes and the significant ones following their comments. There were also 5 internal city departments, sectors involved, urban mobility, immigration, and others, and also heritage were involved in the process to help us develop what we were presenting this evening. The strategic team also engaged in analysis and alignment. We looked at the strategic position of the city, the strategic plan as well. So we want to make sure that we mobilize a team toward that. We also did a comparative analysis of municipal policies from other cities. We are not the first to have grant policies. It exists elsewhere. We looked at what happens in other cities. We didn't copy what happens elsewhere, but we were inspired and we wanted to do various things that, and so we came up with like the city of Sherbrooke, Rimouski, Laval, and Halifax, Charlottetown, St. John, and Gatineau were some cities where we looked at what they were doing. The objectives of the policy, what we want it to do, well, support community organizations and their actions, improve residents' quality of life, diversify the range of activities and services, ensure a clear, fair, and consistent support process, and structure relationships and communications between the city and organizations. With regard to the scope, well, is to establish principles and the general framework, what we're present with the policy, because you have the draft of what we have prepared up until now, to define the types of support and categories, clarifies the role, council administration organizations, and the procedures, define the modalities. So we are also working on two other types of document, a procedural document as to how we manage the grants and a guide to support organizations when they put in their request for financing. There are two kinds of support, financial contributions and also in-kind contributions. This is important because we don't always take into account what we do by in-kind contribution. We don't do this for schools. Some organizations request certain things. So with this new policy, what we want, even in-kind contributions have to go through a new process so we can take note of them. And at the end of the year, we can say, we've given $1 million in in-kind contributions. And is it more than $1 million? Because we have never done this type of accounting for in-kind contributions. It's something that we wanted to do. We identify 5 types of support. So operating grants, capital grants, event grants, thematic grants, and micro grants. These are 5 new categories for support. They can apply for more than one. So you might ask for an operating grant, a capital grants, or a thematic grant. As long as they qualify and follow the criteria involved, they can have access to this type of support. So there is eligibility. As you've seen, or in the policy, there are 7 existing categories. It's not necessary for each group to fall into all 7 categories. Whether you're eligible and answer all the criteria, no, is the answer. There are eligibility criteria for each category, so people should see if they're able to fit into these categories. If you are in, for example, sports, one of the categories existing there is they're eligible to apply for a grant. The fact that they are eligible or will be in this document or in this type of grants, they will be looked at after. So this is the first step. Yes, you qualify. Yes, you're eligible, but then your application has to be of quality and answer all the other evaluation criteria. General criteria. So municipal mandate, everyone has to be involved in a municipal mandate. Eligible and nonprofit organization has to have been in existence for more than 12 months in good standing with the city. So new groups, we want them to be around for at least a year and be well established in good standing with the city and have no conflicts or amounts that need to be reimbursed, and good, clear governance, an AGM, a board of directors, compliance with laws and municipal regulations. I've mentioned the eligible project categories. There are 7 there. We aren't necessarily going to read them all, but every category has examples of projects that are eligible. These organizations will fit into them. The guides, these categories can serve as a guide, and the municipality is not automatic. It's a process that you have to go through, and the assessment serves as a guide, eligibility, automatic funding. There are evaluation criteria. We did a bunch of work. So we brought them down to 7. We went with key evaluation criteria. So geographic research, is it in Dieppe? Is it a regional? Is it a provincial event? And so there is some assessment to be done then, context and financial situation, partnerships, collaboration, creativity, impact of activities and community economic benefits, support for francophonie, inclusion and accessibility, environmental responsibility. So the last four deal with our strategic plan and the orientations that we've given ourselves. It's important for our organization to respect these criteria.
The role of council, well, to determine orientations and priorities through the strategic plan, to adopt the grant policy and its amendments, and to approve an annual budget envelope. Now, at the administration, we are going to implement the policy and the procedures, analyze and evaluate the applications according to the criteria, verify eligibility and compliance, of course, propose the annual budget envelope, determine allocation of funds, and ensure follow-up and communicate the decisions. The role of the recipient organizations is to use the funds for approved purposes, to respect conditions and agreements, to ensure sound governance and financial management, to provide the reporting as required, and we need to make sure that the funding is well used. They have to have accountability, present reports, and agreements with other organizations. That's something that we don't have right now. And something that was asked for by organizations is better communication on the process, the procedure, the deadlines for application, and periodic reminders, information sessions for funding, especially federal, have organized webinars, information sessions. This is something that was asked for, an explanatory guide, and to help people with their application, at least to help them know how to fill it out, and frequently ask questions, the questions that we get the most often, at least give them tools to better fill out their application. Now, next steps. We are finalizing the procedures and the guide currently, the procedures for us internally, how we're going to manage, how we're going to distribute the funding based on the evaluation and so on. And the guide might be a little thicker, but it's going to explain the details of how groups can apply for funding and so on. On March 9th, there will be a notice of motion. On March 23rd, there will be a recommendation to Municipal Council. And at the administration, our intention is to implement it by January 2027, not necessarily for this year. This year, we're going to use the process that we already have in place because the budget has already been earmarked. But as starting January 1st, 2022, we'll start distributing the funds based on this new policy. The process will begin in 2026 because for certain categories, for example, capital funding, we have to know internally, we have to know in June in order to present it during the budget process, to have the debates about it and discussion. So we're going to prepare it for the budget process. So the applications might be received in advance for capital funding, for example, but there might be 3 different times that people can apply for micro funding, for example, micro grants. So that might be a little later, but for operating grants or capital grants, we'd like to have them a little earlier. Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Le Boutier. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. From memory, when was the last review of this? Depends on the policy. I think we received 3 of them about 2 years ago. Well, the policy that's going to be repealed, or it's A37, the sponsorship policy. The donation policy is A20, and the accreditation policy exists as well as L16, which is on events, and L15 is on operating budgets. So they've all been prepared at different moments, different times. So the L21 was reviewed just a few years ago, and L12 as well for contributions to schools. That was 5, 6, or 7 years ago, I think. Well, the most recent one was 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've been around for quite a while, most of them. Thank you. I have 2 questions. It's really great, but we seem to have broadened the scope of the possibilities of people who are eligible. Now, there's, of course, our population has increased and so on, but are we thinking that we're going to increase the budget in future? That's possible. Of course, the first year, of course, we can always be surprised, but there's going to be different criteria. We're all different groups are optimistic. We want to have a greater flexibility. Of course, the first year we'll see what happens, but with this kind of program with greater number of categories, the broader program, yes, it would be interesting to have greater funding in order to support the community in their applications. Amongst these grants and in the selection process, as a municipality, how are we going to make sure that we are equitable? And is it possible? Is it something that's done in other municipalities? Is there a certain percentage? Do we weight the applications depending on the type? Are there criteria that are fair? We have to be very fair and transparent, of course. The population and even ourselves, because I mean, we haven't even seen them for this year yet. So I don't know what happened last year, but this year we haven't seen them yet. Is there going to be a way that we can look at transparency? We can ensure transparency? Well, there's no official committee per se, but the first thing that we're going to have is set up a committee of 3 or 4 people to do the evaluations, and there's going to be some sort of scoring mechanism, whether it's me or I mean, currently there's no way to demonstrate the transparency, but now we have 7 criteria. Now, is everybody going to respect all 7 of them? No, perhaps not. Some more than others. Of course, this will add to the transparency, but so you're really going to try and have something that is concrete, that is not abstract in the choice. People will know why one was chosen rather than another one. Well, the big question now is, why do we give such amount to such and such a group? Well, I mean, there are some groups, I mean, I can't explain why we give this amount to that group. Oh, well, because we've always done so. Well, yeah, but now we want to give ourselves tools that will allow us to say, okay, we're going to give a certain amount to this group, but these are the reasons why we need justification. Why did we give $25,000 to this group? Whereas right now it's based on history, it's based on, somebody decided at some point along the way. Now we're going to trying to develop the tools that will allow us to say why we've given to this group and how much and why not to this group. And it's difficult today to give those kind of responses. So that will help the transparency. People also want to know, they told us they want to know why were they refused. Someday perhaps a letter, okay, you're not, right now you get a letter saying you're not receiving funding. Well, we're going to try and see if we can give reasons why. So that'll increase the transparency as well. Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you, Your Worship. So you answered my question partially at the end here. I think it'll be important in your evaluation grid here. But my question is, when you open the application process, are you going to share these criteria with the people? Or are you going to have information sessions? Well, there's going to be a guide for about 12 pages, or no, the guide is about 30 pages, but the form will have about 12 pages. There's a 30-page guide that will explain the process and explain the process. And so the guide will be very detailed and people can follow the guide to the criteria will be well defined. And I like the response you gave when people say, well, why didn't I get a grant? Well, in the future, you will be able to give them that information. So great job. Thank you. Councillor Gaudette. Thank you. Just a quick question. Is there somewhere on the website that this information is available, the city's website? Well, not the information I presented this evening. No, who receives money and which amount? Well, in the annual report. the information isn't there yet for 2025, but it's there for previous years. Okay, just for transparency, if people wanted to know, somebody wanted to know where the money went, yes, that's on the website. Thank you. No further questions. So thank you very much for your presentation. And it's never easy. That's for sure. This is a very difficult area here to make sure everybody is happy. It's almost like sitting on council, actually. Thank you. So that brings us to one last presentation. Marc-André Fournier is going to come talk to us. Marc-André.
Alors, bonsoir, Monsieur le Maire, membre du
Good
Conseil.
evening, Your Worship, Council, this evening. Is my presentation there? Yeah, we're going to talk about streets today. More specifically, local and collector roads. The road we're not going to talk about are industrial and arterial roads, Dieppe Boulevard and the streets that are found in the industrial parks. More specifically, we're going to talk about cross sections. A cross section is, well, if you cut a street, as you see the example here, this is on Radio-Canada's website. This is the Quebec Bridge. This is a crosscut of the Quebec Bridge. You can see the width. You can see the direction people are going in and the different elements that are a part of the bridge. What I'll be showing you our crosscuts a little further, but we're going to update them. We're going to update them because there are two manuals that are being updated. The design criteria manual, and that this is what consultants ask for when they want to design a project, and the subdivision guidelines manual. So developers and builders use this manual to develop their subdivision plans. Our typical cross sections are in the subdivision guidelines manual. We're going to move them over to the design criteria manual, and the last version of that dates from 2015. So things have changed. What we notice in industry is that there's a reduction of the vehicle travel lane width, and there's more emphasis put today on multimodal transportation. So we're more investing in our trails. We encourage people to walk more, use their bikes. So there's new transportation modes that appear. The e-scooters came out last year, e-bikes as well. But all that to say that it's not just cars that will determine the future design of streets. Since 2015, there's been the tree bylaw that has been adopted as well. So ideally, this cross-section will allow us the planting of trees. There's been an explosion of the population here. The population density has increased. What we see now are more townhouses, duplexes in these new subdivisions. Single-family home subdivisions are becoming more and more rare. People are more packed together, so we want to accommodate them as much as possible. And you're going to see that there's going to be a notice of motion proposed soon. There's going to be changes proposed to the subdivision bylaw. Currently, there are different categories of street in the bylaw, the subdivision. These are going to be removed, and it will refer will refer people to the design criteria manual. They'll still be around. It'll be removed from the subdivision bylaw. So the existing cross-section of a local street, or as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about collector and local roads. So currently there is we have one cross-section for a local road and two for collector road. So a local road, an existing local road here, you can see in the manual, you can see the cross-section and the description, but we've removed the description here to make it clearer, but you can see that the width of the right-of-way for a local road is 18 meters minimum. The 10 meters from curb to curb, the road surface is 9.1 meters. So it's a 80 centimeters for each. Now, if you see the 1.8 meter wide section on the side, that's the sidewalk. But in the notes for this cross section, it mentions that the sidewalk has to be installed when necessary. Well, that's a gap. I mean, there's nothing that defines when a sidewalk is required on a local street. So we're going to try and clarify that. So a local street right now is 18 meters wide. The surface of the road is 9.1 meters, and there could be a sidewalk. We're going to propose two different models for local streets. The first one we call secondary local road. This is the same as I just mentioned, almost 18 meter right of way, 9.1 meters for cars. But this surface, we had discussions internally. We talked about with other departments, and it's worth keeping it at that width when it works well. I mean, it's great for snow removal. It's easy to accommodate even on all streets. I mean, it can accommodate bikes and walkers. What we'd like to put in the manual is the indication that a secondary local street should not bring you to over 100 residential units. So for apartment buildings or semi-detached, we could have a specific criteria saying once you've gone beyond 100 dwellings, then you have to go to the next model. So for us, this could be like dead-end streets or crescents. In a certain development, if there are certain main roads, but they all lead to littler roads, and then you add them all together and it gives more than 100 units, well, you have to move to the next type of local road. Now, the next one is the primary local road, but this would take the place of what we currently have. For example, this is what we have this is an example of a secondary local. This is Rue François Street. It's a dead-end street. So it's single-family homes, not a lot of traffic. People can walk in the street safely. And it would remain the same. I could have shown a Merlot crescent that comes off Thomas Street, for example. The minor collector road, this is an existing cross section. This one is 20 meters right of way. The running service is larger, is wider. It's 10.6 meters wide. And here on the right, you can see that there's 1.8 meters for the sidewalk. Now we're going to get rid of that and replace it with a primary local. So that we're for under 100 units, it would be a secondary local road. Over 100 dwelling units, it would be a primary local road. And what is different in this case is that in consultation with the other departments, we've agreed that it's a good idea that instead of proposing sidewalks, we go towards these multifunctional trails instead. So 3 meters wide, separated from the street. Here it's 2 meters from the curb. So this kind of street we'd see more often with the amendments being proposed. So this would be a neighborhood street that could lead to dead ends or crescents or others. But as soon as there are more than 100 residential units, this is the cross section that we would use. So 20 meters of right-of-way. But what's different compared to what we used to do is that the road it's not centered. Here you can see that it's skewed to the left. The primary local road would have row houses or semi-detached. And if we have a multifunctional trail, we don't want to penalize one side or the other. So the side that has the trail on it, ideally, people there can park the same distance away than the other side of the street. What I'm trying to say here is that the distance from the curb on the left side of the cross section here would be the same as the distance from the multifunctional trail right to the right. From the back of the curb to the right of way would be the same on the side on the multifunctional side as on the other side. Now, right now, if you look at a local street, but according to our criteria, it would be a primary local road. You can see La Rue Désirable Street, it's higher density. Ideally, we would have a trail on one side, multifunctional trail, and it's easier to put a multifunctional trail when you build the road. But especially especially that here the road is right in the middle. If we were to put in a trail, one or the other side would be penalized. So there isn't a lot of room. So if we had to put something in this street, it would be a sidewalk that would be stuck to the curb, because there's limit in the right of way. We're limited in the space we have to play with here. So with what we're proposing, this would fall into the category of a primary local road. Another benefit of this is that, well, you have a trail with a grassed area, and on the other side we could plant trees. You could plant trees on both sides of the trail, for example. One of the advantages that I've heard from the public, one of the advantages of the trail rather than a concrete sidewalk is that it's black. It's a black asphalt surface, so there's less ice in the winter. The ice melts faster because of the black surface. I mean, you could think that the summer would be the opposite, but of course with the trees that we could plant, it would be in the shade, so it wouldn't be that hot for the users. So that's one of the advantages of a trail compared to a sidewalk. And you can just think that once you've planted the trees, in a few years, it'll look like this. This is on the Gulf Road, Gulf Road. So the trees are, there's a curb, there's an area, a grassed area between the trail and the road. And then eventually this is what we would end up with. This is Halifax here, but you can see mature trees and it's aesthetically pleasing. It looks like a very pleasant area you want to live. And the width between the curb and the sidewalk is 2 meters. what we're proposing, 2 meters between the boulevard and the multifunctional trail. Now, that's for the primary local road. The other cross section is the major collector. This one has a right-of-way of 25 meters on the left, and this is the existing. There's a multifunctional trail, 3 meters wide. On the left, on the right side, there's a sidewalk, 1.8 meters. And there's like the minor collector street, the rolling service, the running surface is 10.6 meters. 10.6 meters, if I give you an example, a street like this would be Yvonne or Lakeburn. It's 10.6 meters wide. That's really wide. It's probably not necessary either. Even just the maintenance or the repaving, I mean, everything costs more in the end. So what we're proposing, Lakeburn is a typical example here. What we're proposing is to reduce the asphalt surface to 9.6 meters, from 10.6 to 9.6 meters wide. On the right-hand side, we replace the sidewalk, the concrete sidewalk, for a multifunctional trail, a paved multifunctional trail.
La rue collectrice majeure.
So there'd be 2 sidewalks on the major collector, Dieppe Boulevard, for example, this year, last year as well. What we put were 2 multifunctional trails. They're a little wider, but they're wide right-of-way as well. It's 4 meters large. But for collector roads, we're proposing 2.3 meters. The boulevard here, what we have is 2.5 meters. We could put bigger trees, of course. There's a little more space. The 9.6 meters of running service could take parking on one side, whereas a major collector could have a commercial area. There could be parking on one side of the street as well, and could accommodate a turning lane, for example. Yvonne Street, for example, might be able to accommodate turning lanes later, but you really only need one turning lane to the lift. Typically, the 9.6 meters paved surface would accommodate that. Now, the major collector roads, that's where buses would go as well. So it could accommodate bus stops, bus shelters. The advantages of these proposed changes, well, we'll have trails rather than sidewalks in new subdivisions, and it's hard to build these trails once the street is already built, once the homes are already there in the driveways. So sometimes you have trails that are curved, wavy, because that's not ideal. But if we build them right from the start, that takes care of that problem. And the better, this is the better distribution of space for streets with semi-detached homes, and we don't want to penalize one side or the other. There's simpler criteria as well. Now, the major collector road, or currently, we have major and minor. Well, we had just one with a right-of-way of 25 meters. What identifies a collector road is in the municipal plan. If unless I'm mistaken, in a year or two, the municipal plan is going to be reviewed, and in the schedules, there's a map that shows future collector roads, arterial roads. We'd go through that and identify where we need collector roads, but it would be up to our discretion as well. If we see that there is a subdivision being proposed, and even though if we're a little further away than other collector roads, but we want a collector road because we want buses to go by, well, we could say, okay, well, based on the subdivision, we need a collector road. Because we're eliminating major minor. It'll just be a collector road. And there's also better conditions for tree growth. Perhaps we'll never get to that picture of Halifax that we saw, but it will improve our chances.
Let me show you the proposed changes. At the left, we have existing, and on the right was proposed. So we have local, minor collector, major collector. You can see the sidewalks, local. Sometimes it's there, sometimes not. That's another challenge that we had previously. It isn't defined, but after, you can see secondary local, but there isn't any sidewalk, local primary, a path of wide of 3 meters, collector, the new, same, instead of having a sidewalk. What you see in italics, you have two pathways that are 3 meters wide. Here's a cost comparison. I looked at the cost that the city is paid for with capital projects, and I looked at how much it would cost to have the existing local street and then propose without sidewalk, minor and major collector streets. And so the local street without sidewalk is the same as the secondary local street. There's nothing different there. Local street with sidewalk compared to primary local street, the difference with a asphalt sidewalk of 1.8 meters and the other is 3 meter wide sidewalk, the difference in price is minimal. Even if you go from 1.8 meters to 3 meters, the asphalt is fairly expensive anyway. There are challenges lately with asphalt and even just to get it. And it's easy to install a multi-purpose trail. And at that cost, the difference is minimal. Just to explain, the costs here are asphalt, gravel, the border, some sand and some grass, and it doesn't take into account underneath that the water mains or sewer mains. And so minor collector street and the major collector street, the costs are fairly high, but the collector street was to bring back the paving as well, or the asphalt. There's a direct comparison between a minor collector street and a major collector street. Is the economy of scales. It will benefit not only the city, but the developer as well, and it shouldn't necessarily affect functionality. So I've introduced this to you, but the next steps, I'll be back in March with an update for the design criteria manual, an updated design criteria manual and subdivision guidelines manual. And we have design criteria. Access, this will be ready by the second meeting in March. But until then, we're accepting comments. We sent a message out to developers. I presented what we're proposing to a consultant who does a lot of work for developers, and he gave me some quick comments, but he thought this was well done. He put in some small changes, nothing serious. So from between now and March, we'll be finalizing the cross sections and we'll be listening to comments until then. And there was my friend in planning as well, and he'll come forward with a notice of motion. The timing will be somewhat similar to amend the subdivision bylaw, which talks about criteria, and we'll be updating our manuals. So overall, I think that's it. There you go. Are there any questions by council members? Councillor Le Boutillier, thank you. On average, in Dieppe, our multi-purpose trails, how wide are they? we try for 3 meters wide. If we see that they're stuck along the front, they'll be 3.6 meters. But typically we're looking for 3 if they're paved and in the right of way, the street right of way. You don't see a need to widen them a little bit following the studies that we did with regard to all pedestrians and electric bicycles. They use the same trail. The trail should be widened. We don't think that it's safe the way it is. Well, it's not finalized. We haven't updated these things for the past 11 years. We're improving our system. It's not going to be perfect, but we're going to be looking at other cities because, you know, they go further than us, but little by little, we're getting there. When we talk about e-scooters and electric bicycles, there's a working group that's looking at these matters. They're in discussion with Moncton as well. So they're not ready to put forward recommendations yet, but they're going to be allowing them to be on the trails in residential areas. But on Dieppe Boulevard, where it's very busy, well, then we'll widen it. There are 4 meters wide, but in residential neighborhoods, there may not be the same type of busyness, if you will. We want to accommodate as many users as possible without constricting anyone. I come from somewhere where I thought it was very interesting. They're all pathways. There's a sidewalk on one side, but everything else are multi-purpose trails on one side of the street, and it's divided into 2 with literally a line down. You have the pedestrians on one side, and you have the wheeled vehicles on the other side. And I thought that this might be worthwhile to have a project like this and see how effective they might be. I think we could avoid some of these issues. We often have these discussions internally, especially with urban mobility. We said it's better to have infrastructure in place, and then we can decide how we regulate things and put lines on these multi-purpose trails and see how things are going to. Great. It's been great. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none? Well, the next one, or it's the end of the evening? Is that all? Well, well. I hope everyone had a great time, and I hope you learned a lot. Good evening to all of you.